first off, thank you for your time. Um, I said earlier, you're building literally one of the hardest companies that there is to build in the world. VR is already difficult, and then you've, taken it to the next level with hardware. And so we have hardware founders in this community. We have software, we have games, we have enterprise, we have kind of everything on the XR side. And so I think it'd be really cool to have you come talk. And, I looked into a little bit of your background. It sounds like there was some pretty extreme ups and downs. I did a membership survey, and one of the like highest rated interviews we did last year was with Ryan from Golf Plus, and he went through, 600K of debt and then came out of it. As I was reading your story, I'm like, wow, this is actually quite similar to Ryan's, as far
Yeah,
as like you guys should have been dead in the water and you figured out a way to make it through. So it's pretty inspiring. So
yeah,
I'm hoping that we kind of, inspire everybody, and then we'll open up the floor for questions, and you can meet everybody and they can ask a few founder related things.
yeah. Sounds great. Awesome.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I made a little presentation. I stalked your Instagram pretty aggressively, so excuse me for the invasiveness, but it's all good stuff. Um, if I go full screen, this can be seen. Sometimes I had some weird bugs. Everyone can see this still. Okay.
Yep.
All right, so just real briefly before we start, next week we have a guest joining us who's also a Forbes 30 under 30, just like Renji. That'll be pretty cool. His startup, Veil VR, has raised 15 million. And then we're doing a Vertway virtual networking event as avatars the week after. So that'll be awesome. We're gonna literally run around little characters and talk to each other. Then I'm bringing in Catalin. He's incredible. He was the person that back in 2013 led the Google Glass project, researching AR and children with autism. He's also started and sold two companies and is incredible as a founder. And we're bringing in HP Ventures as well, Angelo, who's done six AR VR investments. So before we get into the future, let's talk about what we're doing today. So, Renji, thank you for joining us. You can correct me if there's words that describe your story better, but I felt like grit and luck was a really good theme for today's conversation. And it's quintessential to any great founder story, so we found. Now, I know this is 2 years before you started Immersed, but can you maybe walk us through what is this photo? Where were you in life, and kind of
Okay.
how you were thinking about everything around like starting a business? And then we'll trace the through route of how you've gotten to where you are today, which is raising your, 20 million from crowdfunding almost.
Yeah, yeah. So this photo is funny you dug this one up. This photo is actually when I was a mid-level software engineer at careerbuilder.com. I was on the API and authentication team there.
Hmm.
Um, Man, this was, I would say, probably the most, I guess, probably one of the fluffiest jobs I've ever had. Where I came in at I think 6:30 in the morning and I got to leave at like 2:30 in the afternoon. Mainly because I was one of the stronger software engineers there, and half my day would be playing ping pong and just like Nerf wars and stuff, and just not really getting much work done. But because I was one of the stronger engineers there, that most of the kind of leadership there would be like, to let him do his thing. He gets his work done, whatever, and leave him alone. Because honestly, my manager was oftentimes at odds with me because I think I was like a maybe 9 months or a year out of undergrad. And a lot of the stuff that he had been suggesting for our architectural decisions, um, I would work on them and then find out, hey, this is actually not going to work. We have to kind of take a different route here. But if that happens over and over and over, well, then his manager sees, well, why is Renji kind of tweaking your architectural decision? That should be you who does that. And ultimately, I guess my manager became pretty bitter. And after about, I would say, maybe 6 months of working there, I had been pretty aggressively pursued by different recruiters back then. This is before there was LinkedIn Recruiter, and so recruiters would just spam your LinkedIn inbox, and all these ones were, promising higher pay. I was like, yeah, why not? I mean, I'm 23 years old, whatever. I'll take a higher paying job, and so ended up, yeah, leaving Career Builder. I would say I learned a lot there. Though it was honestly one of my favorite places I've ever worked because we had awesome hackathons. They constantly had food on site, all that type of stuff. It was a very cush job, but very different, polar opposite of the startup world. Except for the only thing I would say that was similar was those hackathons that we would do over the weekends. It was actually really cool. It's cool how they created a culture of getting engineers to, yeah, innovate in really cool ways, and it really helped move the Career Builder business forward because the projects did have to be relevant to the business. because they were the ones bringing in food and all this type of stuff. But yeah,
And
that's what that picture was.
are you thinking about AR at that point in your life when you're 23
No,
years old? Are you thinking about
no,
even starting a business at that point in your life?
no, no, not at all. So it's actually kind of crazy. I know a lot of successful founders who are tech focused, like Zuckerberg or Elon, started coding when they were like 8 years old. I started coding when I was 20, so I was actually very, very late. Mainly because I didn't really know that I'd be decent at it. I mainly grew up being very focused on math, but in undergrad they had you focus like if you were going to do a math major, you had to take one Java course. So I took it and actually did very, very well. And I had no idea. I've never really coded at that point in my life. I did like HTML, CSS stuff for fun when I was like 12, but then Angel Fire, all those types of things, GeoCities, if you remember that world. But I just didn't really stick with that. And so when I realized I was actually pretty good at coding, that's when I started shifting away from being like a math focused pre-med student to more of, okay, well, how do I apply computer science to medicine? And so I was looking into actually robotic prosthetics and things like that. But if your question is how did I get into VR? Actually, it's funny. I only got into VR when I decided that I wanted to solve this particular problem. So my first
Mm.
VR headset, again, very, very late, was 2017. I bought a Google Cardboard, and I had never really messed with VR at all. I've worked in, at least up until that time, a bunch of different tech stacks at that point, but I'd never done anything with Unity or C Sharp or anything like that. And so yeah, just kind of prototyping. Even back then, I did some prototyping with like Google Daydream stuff, not just cardboard. Obviously, they ended up winding that down and started shifting over to this. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I remember I wanted to figure out a way to make it so that my team that was hybrid remote and some in person, how do we sort of give all of us the same uniform experience? And I'd heard about VR. I remember actually before Career Builder, I used to work at a company called NCR, and one of the our coworkers brought in like a one of the earliest I think it was probably the Oculus Rift like DK1, DK2, one of those very, very early. And I tried it once. It was very nauseating, but it was just a cool technology. So I was kind of aware of it. But and even till this day, I'm not really a typical VR founder. Like I'm not a VR fanatic. Like I'd spend zero time in like VR chat or I don't play any VR games. I'm more of a Halo gamer, my Xbox, and I can't really. I've tried, by the way, Vale, awesome product, awesome founder. I was on the phone with him, I think like 3 days ago.
Oh,
Great
really?
founder. Yeah, he's an awesome. Yeah, he's a good friend.
Down with it.
And I mean, and yeah, he's crushed it. He's done an amazing job. Um, but for me, I just can't do first person shooters in VR because it's just different. It's very different from flat screen gaming. So, anyways, mainly got into VR because of the problem I wanted to solve, not because I come from VR much at all, just to be straightforward.
And so that problem that you wanted to solve is the idea that is it specific to remote work or is it just the work culture in
Both.
general going into and maybe just to catch everyone up. I think everyone's aware of what you've done, but can you talk about like how much you've raised to date and exactly what is the vision of the product? And then I want to bring us to that time when you lost the China deal, but let's have you give
Yeah.
a quick overview.
Yeah. So, yeah, raised about 20 million bucks to date, but 14 million of that, I think, has been crowdfunded, and only about 6 million of that had been from like typical VCs and angels. And so, mainly because, I mean, if you think about it, like we're not a typical, Silicon Valley web mobile SaaS product. Very few VCs want to invest in this space. I mean, plenty of founders here, I'm sure, know the freaking woes of fundraising for VR, especially because what the like 2017 was almost pretty much the VR trough of sorrow, right? Like height of VR was like 2014 when Palmer Luckey sold Oculus to Facebook for 2 billion upfront, a billion earnout. And then, all these startups 2014, 15, 16 had their rises and falls. And then 2017, enter Renji and a bunch of these other founders in the VR space, and there's no VC money left. And back then in 2017, I remember Zuckerberg used to say things like, "Oh, by 2020, we're all going to be wearing glasses instead of using smartphones." And obviously, that's not reality. And so, a lot of us, I think, were really excited about the hopes of what things could become. And we thought there would be venture money, but unfortunately, there just hasn't been. So, I kind of like stumbled into crowdfunding. I didn't really plan it out. So, I guess, did you want me to talk about like
Wait,
what, like the
before
start?
we get into the crowd,
Yeah.
so just say like what are you building with Visor
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, give us a
Yeah.
little product overview real quick.
Yeah. So, actually, before getting into building hardware, started building Immerse in 2017, mainly because yeah, every software development team I'd ever been on or had led in the past, more and more people started working from home. So, this is way before COVID. We used to Skype into our conference room meetings, and it was just a terrible experience, 480p resolution, whatever. And there's just no way to really multi-screen share. There's no way to for coders to pair program together. And ultimately, it was just a really crappy experience. And I knew that if this were going to become an increasingly more kind of annoying problem in the future, that someone's got to solve it. Like video conferencing and chat just can't be the state of the art of remote collaboration. And so that's why I started getting into VR, started doing some experimentation. Got into, well, we applied to Y Combinator and Techstars. We were finalists at both, but YC is very product focused and had more of a product background. But Techstars, at least the pitch of that program in Chicago, was more business focused. So like legal, hiring, finance, fundraising, marketing, et cetera, stuff I had no experience in. And so I decided to go through Techstars. I would still argue YC is a better program, but went through Techstars to help me be a more well-rounded founder. And yeah, going through that program, I guess coming out of the Techstars, like there were plenty of startups who were raising, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million seed round. Whereas for us, we were only able to raise about 340K. And there was only like me and one other engineer anyway. And that engineer was one of my coding bootcamp students. And he's actually one of our core engineers still to this day, which is awesome. He actually was a sales guy in his past life. And so it was really just me and him. Like he was really trying to break into the software engineering world, and he was one of my best students when I was doing engineering mentoring, just to pick up, random shifts here and there to help other students so I can get paid while doing a startup. And yeah, I mean, 340K was enough for us to hire like two more people, but very quickly ran out of that money. I think it was like June 2019, I think. Um, we, so first off, sorry, let me get back to what we do as a company. So Immerse is, I would say, one of the most used productivity apps on the MetaQuest store. By God's grace, we've crossed over 1 million unique users. I think the stat that's more important though is that we've had over 1,600 years of user usage in the past few years on kind of the bulkier headsets. Where I mean, think about it: to get users to spend 1,600 years in your app. I guess another way to put it is there are a lot of apps that have 10 million plus downloads, and maybe kids will play a game, pick it up for 10, 15 minutes, put it down, never pick it back up, or even adults will put it down, never pick it back up. Whereas for our app, we have users who come back 40, 50, 60 hours a week every week. Yeah, even with these, massive, bulky headsets, right? And so that's just something that um, we've tried to figure out, okay, how do we sort of get people to not just have virtual screens in VR and have collaboration in VR together, but how do we sort of get this to non-VR users? How do we get, a lot of these enterprise customers that we've talked to in the past, how do we get them to start adopting these headsets? Like even when the Vision Pro came out, it was very, very, very exciting when the Vision Pro came out. It looks better than like what the Quest and Quest 3s and all those look like, but it still ended up becoming a lot. It was just a lot, just way too heavy, way too expensive. And so the device that we are now working on is Visor. So this is more of a high resolution headset. It's not a gaming headset; it's a work headset. So so the Vision Pro has 23 million pixels. Visor has 25 million pixels. Um, but Visor weighs 186 grams, just the front unit, whereas the Vision Pro weighs about 650 grams. And so the main goal here is how do I create a device that isn't a brick, kind of bulbous toy thing on my head and looks more like a pair of sunglasses, still not quite there, but more like a thin visor type device. And even Visor itself is a 41 millimeter thick device, so very, very small. It's something I can literally hold with two fingers, right? Very, very lightweight. But also it's professional, so you could actually wear it, at a coffee shop or on an airplane or even at your office and not feel like you're wearing an alien thing on your head like previous headsets. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I think that we had to kind of come to terms with the fact that based on everything we had been seeing behind the scenes at a lot of these different tech giants. So context, because Immersed very quickly became one of the top used apps on the MetaQuest store, especially on the productivity side, we would constantly be invited to a lot of these tech giants to try their unreleased hardware, a year, sometimes 18 months before they release it. So even for example, the MetaQuest Pro headset, was kind of like the black, thicker headset. It used to be $1,500, and I think it's about 1,000. But I think they actually discontinued it. We were the first company outside of Meta to actually have access to that headset. They gave it to us a year and a half before it came out. So that was like maybe Q1 or Q2 of 2021. and they shipped it by October 2022. And even though we were brought in so early, we started realizing, man, it's probably going to be more like probably 7+ years or something before there's an actual headset that my friends and family would actually want to use and buy.
Let let me just cut in there real quick. So just to
Yeah, go ahead.
summarize, you basically you're 23, you don't have ambitions of starting a company, you're a software engineer. You go from that to somehow basically learning business, bringing on some random friend from a coding boot camp to be your co-founder. And then over the course of the next few years, you figure out VCs aren't that interested, yet we still raised $20 million.
Yeah, I can
Somehow
talk
you
about that
figure
story.
that out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
from crowdfunding and
Yeah,
achieved a million plus unique users that have downloaded the app over time. So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I really want to like zone in on that for everybody. I mean, you are, and also you are Forbes 30 under 30. So like you're generally my age. So you
Well,
basically
yeah.
figured all this out from almost no advantages inherently, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, what else? A random fun fact. When I was 12, I was a pro Halo gamer. So like I was very in life, I've always wanted to be the best at what I could be for the things I was interested in. And so even when it comes to coding, even though I, started when I was 20, very quickly out of undergrad. So by the time I was like 23, 24, I was a lead software architect at CNN at my last job before I quit and then focused on the PhD stuff and I quit that and then
Mhm.
started Immersed. And so every single job I ever had, I was very, very, competitive. I always tried to be the best at what I could be the best I could be at what I was doing. And so when it comes to building a startup, like I'm not gonna, half-heartedly try to build this thing. I'm gonna give it my all. I guess for me, like when I'm 85 years old or 85 years old, Lord willing, look back on my life and think, did I have a good life? Like for me, it's not, am I well rested, but rather like, do I have any gas left in the tank? So for me, it's like if I have one life to live, I'm gonna freaking live my life to death, literally. And so when it comes to building the startup, I think that was also part of it, like a level of stubbornness. Maybe you can call it grit. Um, Back in 20, so we started this in 2017, went through Techstars towards the end of 2017, 2018, just heads down, I guess started productizing the prototype, had our first, call it, I don't know, 50 daily active users or something. And then by 2019, started running out of money. And yeah, this is yeah, kind of the start. We need China. I don't know if I would say it that way, but um, first off, I didn't even realize our LP was based in China for that fund. So I think it was like June 2019. Oh yeah, it says right there, June, July
So
2019.
just so you had
Yeah.
only the software at this point in July 2019. You're running out of cash.
Yeah, and not even on the MetaQuest store. Like from 2017 up until August 2020. So like three
Uh-huh.
and a half years, Meta constantly said, sorry, we only do games on our store. And so they were constantly boxing me out. I had the only way to download Immerse was to like sideload it. And this is before there was side quests or anything like that. So we had to like take people through the steps of how do you become a developer for a MetaQuest headset or Oculus headset back then. And so we had insanely low conversion of just free users. And so, I think we had maybe 100 daily active users or something at the time.
Mhm.
And so yeah, July 2019, we're running out of money. And so I started fundraising again, trying to pitch angels and VCs and whatever. And by November 2019, like we essentially had $0 left in the bank. But we did have like I think it was like $3.25 million seed round, hard committed. And so yeah, ultimately, yeah, there was a lead VC that was putting in 1.25 million, a previous VC who put in like a 250K check in 2018. They were going to put another million this round, and then another about million of random angel checks.
And
And
they
so,
would have put that money in as long as, some pandemic doesn't happen. I'm sure that
well,
didn't happen,
exactly.
right?
Well, yeah, November 2019, I didn't know there was gonna be a pandemic, and
Yeah.
so that main lead VC, I found out after the fact that one of their major LPs for their fund was based in China, and because markets were tanking in China, LPs ended up not responding to their calls on capital and ended up not investing in their fund, and thus they couldn't fund us. And so the entire round, our lead VC pulled out. Then the follow up, million dollar VC pulled out, and then all the angels were like, "Well, we're not going to invest in this if we don't have a lead VC." And so, yeah, I mean, I went to my team in tears. I think we were 8 people at the time, just telling them, "Hey, like, I guess you guys go look for jobs. Sorry for wasting your time for the past, 2.5 years. We ran out of money." And the thing that was really encouraging was, essentially the 8, including myself, 7 people on the team, ended up saying, "Well, I mean, no, just keep fundraising. We'll keep working." And they really cared about their equity. And what's I think even more insane is it took 6 more months from there. So I think it was like May 2020 where we ended up getting our next dollar, right? So like. the guys on my team were working for free for 6 months, and not everyone's able to do that. But a lot of them were trying to figure out ways to make it work. Like one of the guys on the team, I had to like Venmo him money for rent and things like that. I was fortunately for me, I mean, because he was like, "Hey, dude, my parents told me not to join a startup, and I joined anyway, and now I have no
Yeah.
money left for rent, and I can't tell them that I need help." So I was like, "Screw it, I'll help you." And so, for me, like fortunately, again, when I was like 23 and 24, because I was a lead architect, I was making quite a bit of money as a kid that had no dependents, no kids, no bills, and so I was able to save quite a bit of money. But and I also come from, my parents are immigrants to this country. And so, I think the most my mom's ever made is like 60K a year. So like they didn't really have much money to help me out with anything. And so it was really me coming out of undergrad I didn't know why I was saving a lot of money. I saw it as a game, just like try to rack up as much money in my bank account from this paycheck. But anyways, I was able to live off of savings and kind of help seed some of the people on the team, but all of them stayed up until, so in May 2020 hit, we did close. I think it was like a 950K angel round. So we kind of just scraped together random checks. But this was like 2 months into COVID. And right around this time is when Facebook reached out saying, "Hey, like we saw what you did with, kind of virtual screen. Some of our employees here are using it. They sideloaded it and tried it, and they actually liked it a lot. And so now that, COVID has hit and everyone's working from home, we're actually open to the idea of you guys becoming the first non-gaming app on the Oculus store." And so
Is
obviously I
that a
said yes.
non's team? You don't have to say it if not, but if you can say.
Anandas. So I did know him back. You're talking about Anandas?
Yeah, he was my boss when I was there. I like him a
Oh wow,
lot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've actually worked with him for quite a while, but it wasn't his team. It was Isabel Rodriguez. Is that her name? Isabel something?
Hmm.
Reyes, or something like that. So it was her way back when. She was awesome. I don't think she's at Meta anymore, but so it was like Isabel and I totally forgot Karen. I don't remember their names. It was what, 5 years ago or something, right? And so or 4 years ago. And so what ended up happening was we obviously said yes. Meta gave us a bunch of QA people to help us fix, or identify all the bugs, and we had to obviously quickly iterate over that summer to before our launch in August 2020. And so, but then simultaneously, all throughout that summer, I had random people just texting me, emailing me, people from my high school and college saying, "Hey, like now that COVID's hit, like I, saw some of the stuff that you're working on, like on Instagram or on Twitter or whatever. This makes so much sense. There's a way I can like put money in. I don't even know how that works." I was like, I don't know how that works. I've taken angel money before. I've never taken like random people's money before. And I did a little bit of Googling and found out there was this thing called crowdfunding. And so I reached out to the WeFunder team and learned more about it. And, it turns out that, all these unaccredited investors can put even $100 checks together and give it to WeFunder. WeFunder will then wrap it up in an SPV and then wire you just one check. And so I decided to open up a crowdfunding campaign in summer 2020. And little did I know, within 2 days, we raised $2.2 million. And so that was actually pretty mind blowing to me because I thought maybe we'd raise like maybe 300K on top of the 950K Aints round that we did earlier. But 950K plus, another 2.2
And the,
million.
the
And again,
950K alone was lucky. So now you've got an
yeah,
extra 2 million on top of that. Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. And so, and again, we were only 8 people at the time. Um, But then, yeah, so I think because we then launched the Oculus Store. So that was like July 2020, August 2020, launched the Oculus Store. Very quickly, that became like a very widely, I guess, it was a pretty big success story that fall. And then December was Forbes 30 under 30, which brought in more angel investor eyeballs.
Hmm.
Um, and so because a lot of angel investors saw we did a crowdfunding campaign, a lot of them started emailing me, reaching out to me, whatever, saying, "Hey, are you going to do another one?" And so I just said, I mean, I don't know. I'll take your email. But then sort of March 2021 is when HTC and Microsoft said, this is back when Windows Mixed Reality Store and then also the HTC Viveport store. They said, "Hey, we saw what you did on the Oculus Store. Would you be willing to do this on ours as well?" And obviously, again, I said yes. And so, now we have a partnership with HTC and Microsoft and all these angel investor eyeballs from our Forbes 30 under 30 thing. And so we opened up a second crowdfunding campaign in March 2021, and that's what raised $8 million in 2 weeks. And so I will
Crazy.
say it was,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
Well, I was gonna say it was the thing is at the same time, like it's not like it was just list your company and then it'll explode. There was a lot of quote unquote growth hacking that had to go into it, which is like get friends to share it with friends. Like you have this like 40 person group chat and like let people know, "Hey, here's a link, post this, share this, that type of stuff." There's still a lot of necessary growth hacking to hit the dollar amount that we wanted to target. But I will say that had the market not been where it needed to be, we wouldn't have been able to hit those types of dollar amounts, especially with the type of company that we have. Yes, maybe I'll pause there. I don't know if there's something you want to talk about after that.
No, it's just so funny, the Forbes 30 under 30 thing. It's like they don't know, but 8 months before that, you're going out of business more or
Yeah,
less.
yeah. Well, it's
And
funny
like all of a
because
sudden,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because I didn't even know exactly what Forbes 30 under 30 really was. Because again, I'm coming from the coding world. And so I guess I ended up finding out there were two other Forbes 30 under 30 founders who I knew just because they were part of the Techstars network who had recommended me. And so kind of as a birthday gift, they were trying to get me to be what do you call it? Nominated for Forbes 30 under 30. And then that morning I got an email from them and then I started getting a bunch of texts from people saying congrats, congrats, congrats. I was like, what the heck are people talking about? And then I went to the website and saw that my name was on there. Yeah, I guess I don't really talk about it a ton much anymore because I think there's probably been way more. I think there's like a stat that said like 50% of Forbes 30 founders are like in
Yeah.
jail or something insane. So I'm like,
I did see that. Yeah.
yeah, so that's why I've had other founders who, multi-hundred million dollar founders who messaged me saying, "Hey, by the way, like maybe like a year or two ago, saying, just so you know, that's like no longer a thing that we care with that like this world cares about." And so I've stopped really focusing on it. Again, like I wouldn't say that I'm more of a if you get to know me, more of a CTO than I am a CEO. I'm kind of just CEO by default, so to speak. And so I don't really care as much about how do I hack the business side of things. What I really care about is building a product that I want, that makes my life easier than my team, than our users, than friends and family. And then how do you sort of do that in a way that um, actually helps sort of, I guess, change behavior or influence people to have sort of an easier life, right? Because now the fact that I could bring my screens everywhere, or now all of my coworkers who are remote can be in my virtual office with me. It just makes life easier. And so when it comes to things like the business side, like I would say, I feel like I did, I left a lot of money on the table as a founder because I'm not very business savvy, meaning the Forbes 30 thing was a luck thing. It was just like friends did it proactively. Or even the crowdfunding campaigns, right? Like there was some um, growth hacking that went into it, but, or even like, rounds that we've raised as we started getting, working on hardware, for example, I didn't know crap about like, oh, hardware financing or different things like that, like ways that you can make your dollar go further. I'm just not necessarily a super business savvy founder. I'm again definitely more of a CTO type, but I've learned along the way a little bit, and I've tried my best to surround myself with strong mentors. So yeah, I mean, I guess after those first, I got what 10 or 11 million. Since then, we did another crowdfunding campaign that raised about 3 million bucks on a Friday and a Saturday, so about a day and a half. And then I think what else we did.
Is that your
I guess
third crowdfunding campaign
that
then?
was that was the third one. That was about a year and a half ago.
So the
Um,
first one raised 2 million in 2 days, second one raised 8 million in 2 weeks, and then the third
2 weeks.
one raised 3 million in 2 days.
Yeah, and then
That's insane.
yeah, and then this past summer, I reached out to probably about 50 accredited WeFunder investors, like people who had previously invested,
Uh-huh.
saying, "Hey, like we're looking at raising a larger round, but before that, if you'd like to get in, we'd open another round." And so this was dumb of me. Again, I wasn't really focusing. I was just there's so much crap that we have to do, and that so it's hard to really plan out a lot of these things. But like on a Friday afternoon, I sent out an email to about 50 of these accredited investors and just saying, "Hey, we're about to raise another round. If you're interested to get a discount to that round, let me know." And so that was like a Friday afternoon. By Monday, we had $1.5 million worth of interest. So it just that was very, very. I'm very thankful for the fact that we have a really sort of strong follower base that really believes in our vision and mission. Um, yeah, and so I'm excited for. I mean, there's just a lot that we're still working on. I think that the parts that bore me for the business are things like having to land partnerships and manage relationships and all that type of stuff. That stuff is not as interesting to me. So I would say that that's why I say I'm less of a CEO type, more of a CTO type. But it's necessary evil to building a company. And so even building hardware, for example, partnering with Qualcomm and some of these others, um, there's a lot of relational equity and acumen that you're going to need. And so, yeah.
And so walk us through like I what you're doing is so hard. Like Meta spent, $40 billion on it, whatever it is, and they are barely figuring it out. And so you're trying
Yeah.
to do all this with 20 million and a, significantly smaller team. Um,
Yeah.
but like demos don't work when they're supposed to, like all this stuff's gonna happen and go wrong, right? It's like part of this
Yeah.
process. How do you, I guess, deal with that emotionally? Like there's been
Oh
things
yeah, it
written
sucks for
about,
sure.
yeah, like there's negative, stuff that I think is so unwarranted because
Yeah.
of how genuine you clearly are and what you're trying to build here. So yeah, how do you deal
Thanks,
with it
man.
emotionally?
I will say it sucks, but I will say that Qualcomm has been surprisingly encouraging, man. I really love that team, man. Like so after this IRL keynote event, so context for people, like the IRL keynote event, I was focused, like my delegation responsibility is to be focused on delivering the keynote and then focus on online afterwards, right? So like Q&A or growth hack, whatever, while the team handles demos. I found out first off, like 5 minutes before the demo, I was supposed to do an actual live demo on stage. As I'm trying to boot up my visor, like the latest firmware, all that type of stuff, I'm trying to boot it up. I'm like, why the crap is this thing like crashing? And so I was like, what the heck? We have the freaking keynote in 15 minutes. What the heck is going on? I was like, all right, go find out what the heck is going on. I mean, everything that can go wrong did go wrong. It was terrible. And so I ended up doing the keynote, and you can actually see me in the keynote trying to like connect and disconnect and reconnect the thing. I'm
Yeah.
like why is the thing not freaking booting up? Trying to do the live
In
demo
front
on
of a
stage.
room full of press that you hand
Yeah,
invited. Yeah, it's gotta be
exactly.
frustrating.
And it's live streaming to like I think we crossed over 1 million YouTube subscribers at that point, and we're live streaming to YouTube. So all these people are watching this thing, and the thing is just not turning on. I'm like, we've been working on this for 6 months, man. What the heck is happening like day
Yeah.
of? And so, and now in my head, I'm like, this is what I get for trying to do a fun live event, as opposed to just like, oh, we'll do private demos, come in, and then something breaks. Okay, like 5 people saw it, and then whatever, do
Yeah.
another private demo. Um, anyway, so then I found out like after the keynote that the team has been struggling to even get the demos up and running because we have time slots for everyone to be able to try the headset, all that type of stuff. And anyways, all that to say, after that event, Qualcomm had messaged me saying, "Hey, dude, we heard about whatever's going. There's a couple of Qualcomm people who were there too, and obviously they're reporting back. There were multiple people in Qualcomm leadership who were watching the keynote, and a lot of things were clicking for them that didn't click before. And so they ended up saying, dude, don't even worry about any of the press. Don't worry about any of the crap that you're going to hear. You're going to hear that. Let's just get to master. Like, it was really encouraging. I forget the exact phrase, but something along the lines of like, this is the device that we know needs to get to market ASAP. So just focus on that. And so that was really, really encouraging to have partners like that. That don't really care about the press because they at this point like they are orders of magnitude above all of that as far as their execution. That kind of doesn't really matter what the kind of random naysayers say because when the product comes to market, that just kind of I'm excited because we actually did have maybe call him an influencer come in. We actually got permission to. So I'll say this after the keynote event because of specifically the VR community. This is one thing that was actually very disheartening and discouraging was as tight knit as the VR community tries to be, um, they were the ones that were tearing us down more than anyone, right? And that's what was a surprise to all of our tech partners, right? So I'm pitching to the tech before this whole IRL event. I'm telling the tech partners, dude, the way that we got funded to date was because the VR community has been so awesome, all this type of stuff, blah, blah, blah. We've had these many users because people share by word of mouth. The VR community is awesome. And the tech giants are like, okay, we'll see. Then post IRL, the keynote event that we did, where kind of those backlash and like the because the demos were crashing, um, all the tech giants are sending me articles saying, well, what happened to your VR community? All the bashing is coming from them. But if you look at like Android Central or Digital Trends, they're more generic. They're kind of kind with it. But when it comes to the VR community, they're the ones that are being haters about kind of what you're working on. And so what I've been directed by these tech giants are to ignore the VR, like bump the VR community. I was like, this is going against what I've been trying to do is trying to bridge kind of this gap between the corporate, I guess, sort of, suits and ties and the VR community. And so what they ultimately said was the trend that we're noticing is the less that we communicate with the community, the VR community specifically, the less negative feedback we're getting. And the more we engage with the general tech community, the more positive feedback we're getting. So forget whatever, old school VR native hobbyist world that you've been in, focus more on VR community has been burned. Yeah, exactly. So that's the reason why. A lot of people have seen things like our Para, what was it, Decagear or Deckard? I think it's Decagear. I forgot the names. Lynx R1, all these projects have really struggled. The difference being none of those companies actually shipped a product before, whereas we've had over 1 million users that we've been shipping product every single day with. And then all on the software side. And then the hardware side, we have the tech partners who ship plenty of products. Qualcomm, Pegatron, BOE, like they've done what they need to do on, and then you'll hear a couple more large tech giant partnerships. So we've sort of de-risked a lot of the hardware execution because Pegatron does 10% of iPhones. Qualcomm has been on every XR headset you've ever tried, minus the Apple Vision Pro, or the standalone headsets. It's BOE's industry leader in optics or displays. And so all that to say, like that's why they were just saying, hey, forget kind of the negative, like all this negative press will become moot or kind of just irrelevant as soon as the product ships and people start seeing it. So one thing that I did get permission to do is bring in one particular influencer that they like, that they trust, that they have a relationship with. And so it was really cool because we got to have him try it, and he's going to be releasing his video later. I think it's later this week. It's his channel, his video, whatever. So he'll pick, but I think he said later this week. And I didn't get to see the video yet, but I was there when him and the team were kind of talking through his candid response. And honestly, it was extremely encouraging to hear his actual review of this. And so, yeah, I guess people will see at the end of the week that it kind of doesn't really matter what the VR community, particular PR outlets have said the past 3 months. So a couple of guys here in town who, I live in Austin, Texas, and there's a lot of tech founders here. So some of the guys we play basketball with, the Airbnb co-founder Joe Gebbia, Palantir founder Joe Lonsdale, and some other people, kind of some of Elon Musk's friends, Elon Musk's kids play basketball with us as well. One thing that some of the more successful founders like Joe Gebbia, Airbnb, or Joe Lonsdale say is, get used to the sad reality of building companies is get used to two things. Get used to negative press all the time, no matter what. And then also the sad part is, thankfully we haven't had any lawsuits to date. But they said get used to lawsuits. It's just what you're signing up for if you want to build a successful company. And so Joe Gebbia was saying, Joe Gebbia, the Airbnb co-founder, he's on the board of Tesla, and he was saying, just go to Google right now and just type in Tesla lawsuits, see how many are actively open right now. And at
Right.
the time we looked it up, it was 17 live at that moment. So I was like, that's freaking psycho. How do you build? And again, I'm a first time founder, so I had no idea. Like when I think about lawsuits, I'm like, that's like a personal offense is what it feels like. Be like, dude, it's the business, like it's just how it works. So don't worry about it. For all you know, if Visor is any successful, you might see Meta sue you for some kind of infringement of something, and you'll see Apple sue you for something, and you just got to get used to it, man. I was like, well, that sucks. Okay, well, I guess we'll find out. So when it comes to negative press, that should be like nothing compared to how escalated things can become. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
it's that was one of the reasons I was really hoping to have you on here is because like I saw some of that. I'm like, I don't think people realize how hard what Renji's trying to build actually is.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, I don't think I could deal with press. Like I've not gone through that experience, but yeah, it
yeah.
seems miserable.
Well, I won't name
Um,
names. I think that one thing that, as I reflect on it, one of the funniest things I would say was at the IRL event. This is so funny. So at the Immersed IRL event, I'm not going to name names. One of the press representatives, editors, came up to me as I was literally like debugging stuff with my team to try to get demos up and running. Came up to me and said, "Renji, I just need 2 minutes of your time, please, please." I was like, "Okay, sure, fine." Okay, got pulled aside. He said, "So one of the team members here told me that these aren't real devices, that there's no electronics in them, that you're just fake this whole event." I was like, wait, what? Well, first off, that would be news to me, first off. Second off, no one on my team told you that because we've all been working on this. So I knew he was just trying to like lie to try to get me to like slip up and say something so he could then use it in an article. And this person was part of the VR community. So I'm like, I don't really understand. How are we saying that this is a supportive, kind of building up type VR community? Not at all. This is freaking dog eat dog world. And so I've gotten way more support. Like about 70% of our pre-orders are actually from people who've never had a VR headset before. Only about 30% are from the VR community. And so many people are saying, this is my first headset. I'm so excited for it. And many of them are, some of them are, people who are just in corporate America. Some people are, prosumers, productivity people, and none of them ever had a VR headset before. And so we've gotten so much support from people who just haven't been in the space. And I get it. The VR community has been burned by sort of these no-name, random startups that have never had a track record of shipping anything before. But I'd like to think that Immerse is a different company than that. Like again, we've iterated with the Immerse software with over millions or a million users. We've raised 20 million bucks. We've had partnerships with Meta and Microsoft and Google and Qualcomm and Pegatron and all these tech giants. So it's like I think we're a little bit different. That's my hope. Like
no,
even I would say, go ahead,
You're
Don.
you're in the right room. I think what we're trying to do here is build that supportive XR community. It
Yeah.
literally says the one thing we're here for is support on the company
Yeah.
bio, and
Yeah.
so I don't want to rehash it because I know it's a sensitive subject, but I do
Yeah.
I do
It
want to
sucks. Yeah.
extract like some of these lessons, and I think
Yeah.
these lessons are what I saw you shared, and I think they're relevant to even what you're talking about here. Can you
Mhm.
maybe go through some of
Yeah.
these and like how they've played a role? And then as
Oh,
soon
this is
as you
great.
go through a few of these, let's have everyone raise their hand. So if you can raise your hand, I'll put you in the queue. And then let's have some people come up and ask you questions directly. Um,
Yeah.
but number one is something that we talk about a lot. Inga from Shapes XR came and spoke with us a
Yeah.
few
She's
months
awesome.
ago.
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
like you could just tell her self-belief was through the freaking roof, and that's why she
Yeah.
was so good at fundraising. So can you maybe talk about this one and even to give an
Yeah.
example?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, I mean, even just recently, like I've been thinking about this, I was like, I remember as I reflect back on this now 8 year history of building Immersed, there are moments where I'm like, man, this thing is going to fail, isn't it? And I'd always tell myself, just one foot in front of the other, just keep going. And then a month later, 2 months later, we have some sort of something crazy happens, and then I have an emotional high. I was like, why was my mentality so like in this like pit 2 months ago or whatever? And what that showed me was at the end of the day, irrespective of how I feel in the moment, that doesn't like the reality is not dependent on how I feel. And so because of that, along the way, I might as well have irrational self-belief because that's only going to increase my chances of success. Right. So like all the time you hear about like, Steve Jobs is what do you call it? Reality distortion field. Or like, Elon Musk has such aggressive timelines and he never hits it. He was talking about achieving full self-driving back in 2016. And we're just literally almost 10 years later about to actually, I mean, FSD is really, really good now. So when it comes to like irrational self-belief, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like no one else, I mean, even your closest friends in the back of their mind will have some doubts. And at the end of the day, like I'm not a self-help type person, but I guess my point is with that statement is if you want to increase your odds of success or your chances of success, um, you probably will do that if you have just a better mentality than if you were to be negative all the time, right? So irrespective of self-help or whatever, like I'm kind of whatever about self-help. I think that it's important to feel the pain and then know how to respond to it as opposed to just have thick skin and then be callous. Like I don't think that's the way to do it. um, but I think that at the end of the day, if your goal is to increase your probabilities of success as high as and make it as high as possible, then I truly believe that being irrationally optimistic is the way to do that. um,
I'll show you the second one here.
yeah.
I like this one a lot. Number two. Maybe you
When
could
listening,
read it out
yeah,
loud for
when
everyone.
listening, sure. Yeah, when listening, pay attention to your focus. Oh, I love this one. I forgot about this. I used to do this so much. When listening, pay attention to your focus and comprehension, then crank the dial 2x. Repeat. Every experience in life will become increasingly net positive because of how efficient your learning slash memory ability will become. This is something that it's funny that you say that. So um, I talked to my team member or one of my team members about this even yesterday. So we were doing a pretty high profile demo yesterday for a pretty high profile partner. And at the end of it, I was like, how did you guys think that went? And they're like, what are you talking about? You were there. And I was like, yeah, but I blacked out. I I just woke up. I don't even know. I don't, they're like, dude, you freaking crushed it. Like, it just seemed like you were a magician. I'm like, well, great, because I don't know how I. And even at the immersed IRL keynote, Qualcomm's leadership was saying, "Yo, great job! That was such a good keynote. You freaking nailed it. Don't be surprised if everyone starts copying, like all the tech giants start taking this approach." And then I think like a week or two later, you saw Meta announce, "Oh, they're working on like a 110-gram headset with a wire." And like when Boz said he will never do a wire because Apple Vision Pro got it wrong, whatever. It's so funny because um, even at that immersed IRL keynote, I like blacked out. Like meaning I what I realize I do is when if the like even here, I'm gonna not really be able to reflect on this because I'm gonna forget what I even said. Whenever I'm focusing on something, I forget that I exist. I'm mainly focused on what's the goal here. If the goal here is to get a message out of my head and into yours, and how do I sort of solve that puzzle of shaping the information from my head and making it fit with yours, I'm mainly focusing on that, right? So like, what was it? I think it's like a 3 on the Enneagram of person's like very high self-image type person. Um, for me, I think I'm an 8. I forgot what that is. I just remember it was the number 8. I'm really good with numbers, but I suck with words clearly. A more of a maybe kind of a completer, a doer, an executor type. For me, when it comes to executing at the business, even just having conversation with people, flow state, yeah, yeah. So yeah, Jason Marsh said blackouts called the state of flow. Yeah, I mean that's what it feels like. And so the whole point of that number 2 there was when you're listening to people, you think you have a certain level of comprehension, but your comprehension is not as good as it possibly could be. And so every single word that you're saying, I should be focusing on, listening to, and then really trying to understand what you're saying, as opposed to a lot of people, they're not even listening to you. They're just trying to think about the next thing they're about to say in order to respond to you, as if the response is even relevant to what you're saying. And so for me, it's more, no, how do I really make sure that we have the most efficient type of communication? And the only way I can do that is if I'm actually listening or reading what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite. Number 2 is one of my favorite ones. That's one of the tricks I tell my team just like you think you're listening, but I don't think you are. Like you need to really try to crank the dial a little bit when you're listening.
It's interesting you say that because one of the techniques I do in Zoom calls or on these or on investor calls is I'll follow every word in someone's sentence for about 3 sentences. And like
Hmm.
I'll just every single word I'll try to visualize in my
Yep.
head. And it basically puts me into that conversation. And you know, you can
Yep.
force yourself to listen to every word for 3 sentences, and that does
Yeah.
wonders. So that's
Yep.
that's
Yep.
very interesting. You have that
Agreed.
philosophy.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's open up the floor for some questions here. We got 15 minutes left. Again, Renji, thank you. I know you're busy and you're a CTO type, but this means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah,
I'm ready.
I think I'm good on time. Yeah,
All
I'm good
right,
on time.
cool.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Don. Hey, Renji, pleasure to meet you. And
Good to meet you.
so I'm building a augmented reality social media platform out here in the UK, and I'll be going the route of pitching to investors very shortly. My question is more about the a very specific aspect of realizing that you're in a vicious space surrounded by companies that could potentially just I would say create another version of your thing
Yeah,
and call it their own, like whether it be Apple or Meta, just saying, well, here's our version. You don't need to download this competitor anymore.
yeah,
And does that worry you? And how would you approach questions
yeah,
from investors that might say, well, what if Meta does that tomorrow? What if Apple
yeah.
does that? How would you approach that question? Have you had that question before?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's one of my favorite questions. Of course, I've had that question all the time. It's funny because I don't know, like for me, I think it was actually a Y Combinator lecture where they talk about, I think it was Sam Altman, the current CEO of OpenAI, who used to run Y Combinator, used to say in one of his videos, um, most startups fail because of internal issues, not because of external competition. And so at least I've seen that to be true. It's funny because the Meta Horizon Workrooms app is pretty much a very, very similar app to what Immerse does today. Um, if you just look at the reviews on the Oculus store, the MetaQuest store, you'll see like they have way more 1-star reviews than they have 5-star reviews. Whereas for us, we have, I think it's like maybe 70+% 1-star reviews, and I think like 13 or 16% 1-star reviews. And my sort of point is when Meta first announced Workrooms, a ton of angel investors and even WeFunder investors, 5,000 people would message me saying, "Oh crap, Meta's doing this now. Like, what are you guys going to do?" And I was like, it wouldn't surprise me if first off they don't build as good of a product, mainly because they're not hyper focused on it the way that we are. But then also simultaneously, I also know that they'll likely have an ad budget behind it. And as long as we have a better product, then ultimately people will gravitate towards our thing. So Meta's ad budget ultimately becomes our ad budget, and that's what ended up happening. So a lot of churned Meta Horizon Workrooms users are now immersed users, and there will continue to be many, many apps out there that try to create similar stuff. Um, even like John on this call has a very similar app called Fluid that does more of the browser side of things. They just announced a desktop streaming type app, and it's cool. I think it brings a lot of more eyeballs onto this stuff, kind of more educating, exposing people to the world of spatial computing. I think it's important for there to be more and more products out there. I am highly competitive, and I mean, at the end of the day, like I can't be on top of all the different apps out there that are similar to what we do or not. We'll learn from each other. I'll learn from his app. He'll learn from ours. I'll learn from Meta. The Meta will learn from us. Actually, Meta had paid us nearly about $1 million to actually help them with some of the tech for workrooms, which a lot of people don't know that. It's actually I'm thankful that Meta paid us first off because we needed it at the time for sure. This is back in 2020, I think. Oh, sorry, early 2021, I think. And right after that $8 million crowdfunding campaign, I was like, hey, let's just like keep whatever ways that we can keep our bank balance up. Let's do that. And so yeah, ultimately, like Meta needed some help on some stuff. We needed them to prioritize certain open APIs that they just weren't prioritizing in the past. And I knew that if I were going to help them on their workrooms thing, then they would prioritize it more. So then we started having access to different things like keyboard portals and things like that that didn't exist back there, or keyboard tracking algos. And so when it comes to investors, I would say oftentimes a lot of investors who ask that question, either they never built a company before, or at least an early stage company. I would say that when you're hitting some massive scale, like here's a counter argument, or steel manning the other side. When you look at companies like Slack versus Microsoft Teams, Slack used to be like the belle of the ball, so to speak, of chat online. And as soon as Salesforce acquired Slack, good job, great exit. I think his name is Stuart Butterfield or something like that. Stuart Butter
Yep.
something.
Yep.
And yeah, and so but then Microsoft obviously started building teams and started adding that to everything. And I think they like 10x or almost even 20x their user base over Slack. And unfortunately, way more people are adopting Teams, unfortunately for Slack. And so that shows you that distribution and scale does matter. I will say that when Visor comes out later this summer, as for sort of the standard kind of mass production people, we have earlier Founders Edition customers that are getting theirs earlier, but for the mass production units, um, we truly believe that there's probably going to be maybe even less than a 2-year clock before we start seeing like Meta and Apple and others create a visor type device. And so what that means is, well, we have to figure out a game plan for that, right? And all that to say, like, I think that startups need to compete against tech giants orthogonally. Like, I think another really cool lesson is, and John, take this as encouragement for you. Um, a lot of just as we're I think he's competing more against maybe Oculus browser or something or Meta browser. Um, like when I think about like Steve Jobs of how he came back to Apple in the late 90s, I think like 97, and they had 4% market share on Mac OS versus Windows had 96% market share. He really wanted to figure out a way to compete orthogonally to Microsoft in a way that Microsoft was not incentivized to compete. And Microsoft was sort of the go-to for like corporate and like I don't even know what all things, everything but what Apple was focusing on. Apple mainly focused on education and then creatives. And they're like, okay, well, of all the, I don't know, educate, like kind of, I guess, like, was it like on-campus libraries and computer labs at schools and creative houses, whatever. We have 80% market share, which is, Microsoft has 3% of the market share there. We have 4. So we have more than that, or whatever numbers are. And I guess 1% versus 4. And Steve Jobs was like, let's just keep doubling down on that. And then they started getting into more pop culture when it came to things like iTunes and music. And Steve Jobs started realizing, well, we can start creating sort of an ecosystem and a suite here. And again, Microsoft wasn't really incentivized. They didn't start working on Zune until 5 years after that. But once Apple achieved 150 million iTunes users, kind of off the back of Kazaa and LimeWire and FrostWire and all those others that were illegal music downloading. Apple wanted to make iTunes the legal music downloading app. They started realizing, well, now we have a competitive edge for creating this iPod device, and all of this has better integration if you were to have a Mac. And when it comes to, I remember back in the early days of like making the band or like Kanye West or whoever was always on a Mac, always using all of their stuff on the Mac side of things. And so all that to say, um, Apple ended up, I think it was 2010, overtaking Microsoft's market share when they were down to 4% just a decade earlier. So what he realized was Microsoft was not incentivized to target creatives and education. But as Apple then started realizing a way to compete in a way that Microsoft was incentivized to at the time, they then started getting way more market share and then ultimately started, I guess, usurping over what Meta was able to pull off. When it comes to like Immerse, for example, and Meta, um, Meta and Google and all these others, I actually approached them first before I started building Visor. I didn't want to work on hardware. I went to them saying, hey, by the way, this is kind of the specs that we would want to create if you guys would partner with us and you guys make the hardware. We can't afford it. We just want to build software. And all of them agreed someone should build this thing. And none of them decided to do it. And so it really came down to them saying, if you figure this out, we'll ultimately end up following you, aka copying your approach if you prove this out before us. And so I'm like, well, we're a broke startup, so I don't know if we're going to figure out a way to do that. And so by God's grace, we've gotten to that point today. So all that to say, long story short, um, these tech giants and other competitors um, have to be better at playing your game. If you have an authentic desire to build a specific type of product, then that's great, and I think that you're fine. It's just important to be a prudent, consistent founder who, yeah, just week after week, month after month, make sure that the money that's coming into the bank is a lot more than what's going out. And then also at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, like I have friends who have built companies for, like one of my friends, he started his company 10 years ago. They've been barely cash flow positive for 10 years, and he can technically live forever. He's not going to go out of business. It's just he hasn't built a hyper scaled company. And so he kind of, it's a lifestyle business and it's not what he wanted it to be. And so he's likely just going to sell it to PE and then work on his next thing. But it depends on your goal. So I would say don't worry about investors' opinions on that because that's sort of like a battle-tested kind of age-old fallacy. And you could just go back in history and see everyone else's perspectives on this, or even just historic events that happened of how small startups overtook big giants, but then also the vice versa of when some startups hit their peak and then didn't sell early enough, like Clubhouse or whatever, right? They probably should have done something sooner. I can go all day about this, but that's one of my favorite questions. So good question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great answer. Yeah, you can tell you've been battle tested from VCs for that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Mike, come on up here. We got 4 minutes left. So Mike, can you try to maybe you'll be the last one. Let's see what we can get through here.
Sure. Wow, no pressure. I was just curious, maybe on a just super high level, what are the positive and negatives of crowdfunding? And then also, how does that affect the communication you have, or does it, between VCs and your crowd backers?
Mm. They oftentimes are very much at odds. I will say that VCs, interestingly enough, it was funny in our $8 million crowd fund. So first off, I was trying to not do a second crowd fund. I was trying to go to VC saying, "Hey, look, we raised $2 million in 2 days. Would you consider doing another, or doing an actual VC round for us?" And all these VCs are saying, "Oh, no, we haven't seen this to be successful just yet." Oh yeah, you just scrolled past the Intel CEO. So Intel's former CEO is one of our investors as well. It was really encouraging to have his kind of vouch for this further up. But also, like, what I realized with a lot of these VCs was when we ended up raising that $8 million crowd fund, I saw that 7 VC firms slid smaller checks in without even talking to me. So I was like, so what I realized is, like, they're humans. They are subject to FOMO. And if they think that you're going to be a rocket ship with or without them, they're going to want to come on board. And so that's why I've come to realize, like, it shouldn't really matter what VCs say or think. You're going to build your company. You're going to be successful with or without their involvement. And the question is, do they want to be part of it? That's up to them. And so I would look at the sad reality I've come to realize early on is I took more of a relational approach early on. I tried to spend a lot of time with one VC and try to become good friends and all that type of stuff. And in the end, they just end up saying, "Hey, this is not interesting for us." I was like, "Okay, well, wasted all this time." And so, like, why did we hang out so much? But also at the same time, well, I mean, at least I thought there was some sort of mutual thing here, fit here. Like, they would ask a lot of questions about the startup and dig through all this stuff. And it's like, "Oh, why are you digging if you're not interested?" That was really weird. I think it was just out of, curiosity, and they're paid to do so. But then what I realized is, I guess sort of some of the rounds that I've done with VCs only, again, only like 6 million of the 20 million we raised was VC, but those were like just more of a numbers game. I would pitch literally 100 VCs, and then like 3 or 4 would say yes. And so because I pitch immersed all the time unofficially, just living life, because people ask about it and have no choice but to get better at communicating it. I'm like, all right, might as well make some of these calls. Just do a discipline of 3 or 4 VC calls every Friday afternoon or whatever, and just like talk to these people over the course of time, and then all of that. So, and then at some point, some of them say yes. When it comes to crowdfunding, a lot of them look down on crowdfunding because they look at it as like a last ditch effort for survival. But I think the difference for us was, because we've set different records for crowdfunding campaigns, they more so would just like have FOMO and then throw their